The title is The Best Paris Guide. I wrote this book with students and teachers in mind. This is a guide.
It's breathtaking, isn't it?
Particularly geared for American teachers and students studying abroad in Paris. The focus of this book is to talk about all of the places in Paris through the lens of art, architecture, history, and culture. I wrote this book because this is the book that I wish I had had with me every time I took students to France. The book is organized in a way that is very easy to find things. It is organized by monuments and attractions is the first chapter. The second chapter is museums, and then churches, and then places, and by places I mean like the Place de la Concorde, public squares, gardens. Finally, there's a section on places outside of Paris, like Versailles and Chartres and Saint-Denis Cathedral. And then there's also a section on diversions, like shops and restaurants and bars, like the Moulin Rouge, the Cabaret. My hope is that it will allow teachers who might not be as familiar with some of the art to read this book, familiarize themselves, and to be able to stand in front of the paintings with students and tell them why this painting is in a museum and why it's important and why you should be looking at it and considering it. My book talks about the architecture of the Louvre, it talks about the history of the Louvre, and then it also talks about specific works of art in the Louvre, and it shows pictures of those works of art so that if you are a teacher and you are standing in front of the Mona Lisa, you can read my description and commentary of the Mona Lisa and share that with your students, beyond just, this is the most famous painting in the world, painted by Leonardo da Vinci. So, if you're an art historian and you already know that, you probably don't need to read that. But if you are not an art historian and you're still in Paris with students, it's going to be very helpful to have that information. And likewise, if you are an art historian but maybe don't know the history of that building of the Louvre, you're going to get that in my guidebook. The cathedrals in France are absolutely spectacular. They are marvels to behold, both in terms of architecture, the structure, the buildings themselves, the art that is inside the cathedrals, the treasures inside of the cathedrals in terms of reliquaries, like Notre Dame de Paris has, purportedly the crown of thorns that Christ wore. And you can see that. It has the coronation gown that Napoleon wore. So the churches are absolutely must-see for anybody going to Paris or the surrounding regions. And when you stand in front of a church like Notre Dame, it can be overwhelming because, like I said, there were literally thousands of images to look at. So what I did in this book was break it down and talk about the most famous or the most important images to look at and point out to students. Because, if you don't have something, you're just absolutely overwhelmed. So I did a whole chapter on transit, talking about how to use the buses, how to use the metros, how to use the TGV high-speed trains. They have trolleys. And it is a very efficient and easy to use system. It's very convenient as long as you know how to use it. But if you wait until you get over there, it might be a little bit intimidating. In each of the entries, it lists the hours and the days that it's open, and it also lists very clearly to see the days that it's closed, so you don't have to go online to do any research as far as that goes. It tells you the metro that you would use to get there. And then it also lists other attractions and destinations that are within a 10-minute walk of that place. I wrote this book because this is the book that I wish I had had with me every time I took students to France. I wrote it for myself really as sort of a cheat sheet in case I forgot about specific things, because there's just so much to know. I mean, you can't possibly know it all. It's a reference guide and it's a cheat sheet for people who don't know everything and for people who do know everything but might, forget when you're standing outside, with your students. I plan to carry my own book every time I go to Paris because it is peace of mind. I think it's going to be essential when I travel to Paris with students to have that book.